Welcome to the Abe Legal Podcast, where you are able to get some really great information from wonderful lawyers about a variety of topics. And today we have a wonderful guest all the way from Illinois who's going to talk about his career as a corporate lawyer, a litigator, and an advisor for both healthcare entities and other entities. It's absolutely important for you to pay attention to this. We're going to be really giving some great information out, and so we don't want you to miss. If you are not already a subscriber, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you like the content, please feel free to share that and give us some feedback in the comment section. If you have any questions, drop them in the comment section. We'll make sure we get those answered. So stand by for a wonderful podcast with Attorney Syed Ahmad. We're back, and we're glad to have Attorney Syed Ahmad with us all the way from Illinois. Attorney Ahmad, can you give me a little bit of just a background about yourself? If I was going to be picking up a book and looking at the opening chapters about who Attorney Ahmad is, what would I read in that book?
Well, first of all, good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity and for bringing me on to the podcast. A little bit about myself. I'm an attorney. I started practicing law back in 2008. I've kind of done a little bit of everything from the criminal side to the civil side. I was a prosecutor formerly here in the state of Illinois, worked for the city of Peoria, and then moved on to the civil world, where I worked for one of the larger firms outside the Chicago area in the state of Illinois. Did that for a few years, and now I'm in private practice. I concentrate primarily on helping out medium to small size businesses with everything from A to Z, setting them up, helping them up with litigation, and if need be, merging or dissolving those corporations or companies for that matter. I do also dabble a little bit into criminal defense as a former prosecutor. And of course, I also have an interest in Islamic wills and trusts, as that's a passion of mine, making sure that every Muslim in the country knows that Islamic wills and trusts and Islamic probate is available as an option for them. And that's something that I really, really strive to work on.
Excellent. So, and we always like to give the attorneys an opportunity to talk about, their practice, about anything that's interesting that they're working on. Can you share with us, something about one of the cases that you're working on right now that folks might find of interest?
Well, absolutely. So without going into too many details about cases, I can talk about a case that I'm working on currently. I'm working on seeking a preliminary injunction for a shipping company located in Chicago that had some employees essentially aligned with the competitor and then moved on and took some business that way. And the competitor is trying to use that and has actually leveraged that to steal clients from my client. And it's a massive project. We're talking about 6 figures, 7 figures into the losses. So we're working on an injunction and hopefully having some sort of resolution where the company that stole the business will be barred from being able to do business with the clients that belong to my client.
based upon lessons that you're learning here, what would you recommend to people as a way of trying to avoid them from having their business stolen, like was the case in your
I think it's important to stay abreast of the situation. And understand, especially if you're a smaller and mid-sized business, understand where your employees' interests lie. Not necessarily in keeping your employees happy. The employees were happy, but having a proper plan, having a proper employee handbook, for example, so that you have certain rules that govern the behavior of the employees, making sure you have proper agreements with them, like an NDA, for example, if you need a confidentiality agreement for your employee, and making sure that there's a non-compete clause. I know in this situation, for example, my client does not believe in non-compete clauses, but I don't think a lot of times clients fully understand what that means. It doesn't mean that there shouldn't be competition. It just means that there shouldn't be unfair competition. And it's important to educate business owners to mean and what benefits they can derive from. So that's the example. I can give you another example. I just got home not too long ago from another case that I had, where the client got more than what reasonably we would have imagined him to get, but the emotions were kind of getting in the way. And then we had to take a step back and say, hold on, what did you expect coming into the case would be what you would be getting versus what you would be losing, like the pros and cons. And in addition, if we're all set for a hearing, which way do you think the judge would have ruled? And once that comes into context and you're able to educate and talk to the clients in a way that you can kind of hold their hands and walk them through the process, they're better able to make those decisions, when they're weighing their costs and benefits. And they're able to make decisions that are smarter and hopefully better for them in the long term. And thankfully today, the client did follow through with the advice.
Now, you just talked about something that I think is really important, and that is, again, the idea and the dynamic between the attorney and the client, particularly when there's an issue about advice that needs to be rendered. How do you engage with the client? What would you recommend to both lawyers as well as clients as it relates to trusting their counsel and giving them the best shot of succeeding by allowing their counsel to use the tools that they have honed in the years of practice?
Absolutely. I think a lot of times with the young attorneys, for example, they tend to look at themselves as litigators or as attorneys that, hey, I know what I need to do, and the client should come on board and do it. And they're really good at drafting or they're really good at litigating. What, as attorneys, we have to understand is that we're counselors as well. So we actually have to constantly work with the client and give them advice. And sometimes they're going to follow our advice and other times they're not. But that is very important. It's actually walking with the client almost hand in hand and getting to them to make the decisions that you believe in your expert opinion is beneficial to them. Now, I try to make it a team type of effort because obviously there's certain things that the client knows better than I would ever know, especially items related to their business or their case in general, whatever the nature of the case may be, whether it's family law, whether it's civil law, whether it's criminal law. They know a lot of what is important to them. But at the same time, you have to be able to to give them proper advice and counseling so that they can make the decision that to an outsider might not always seem like the best decision, but for that specific client, that is essentially what they've been seeking all along. So as an experienced attorney, you have to know what your client's goal is, and that does not always follow the common sense routine as we might think of it. And they approach life and their business differently, and you have to understand that.
It's interesting you say that because there's a lot of tension oftentimes when you have those types of matters that really do depend upon whether or not a client is going to trust you, and give you the freedom to do what you know how to do. What would you say in terms of entrepreneurs, especially those who are first starting out? What are some steps that they can take to avoid, having to hire an attorney to get them out of litigation? Would it be, hire an attorney up front so you don't have to pay as much for an attorney on the back end, or what would be your recommendation?
Absolutely. I think even for a small business, you should hire an attorney up front. Make sure all your paperwork is done properly, and make sure you're structured properly, and that you actually have a process in place so that you're legally properly administering the business. All of that, and sometimes even receiving counseling. So I have some clients that will come in and they say, well, how do I make sure I face no liability whatsoever? And you tell them, well, that's an impossibility. You have to reach a point where you could say, I'm comfortable with it. And beyond that, perhaps an advice could be, make sure you buy some sort of liability insurance to cover you beyond a certain level. All of those things, you should have an attorney or a counselor to help set you up so that you can proceed with that comfort, knowing that you're protected. And then life happens. And hopefully you're protected most of the time. And if you're not, then, you've already made that relationship with your counsel, with your attorney, and you can give them a call. And sometimes it's a small issue that can be resolved very quickly. And usually attorneys are very good at that. And they're very good at taking a bigger issue and actually making it a smaller issue for you. I have had numerous clients that come in and they think they've reached a dead end and there's no resolution, and they stand to lose 5-6 figures on a transaction. And then an attorney can come in and say, no, just work around it, and we can resolve the issue. And so it's really important to have that counsel, to have that relationship if you're an entrepreneur with an attorney from the beginning who understands what it is that you want and is able to counsel you and essentially prop you up, at least on the legal end, so that you can succeed on that with your business.
Now, I know that you also work extensively with Islamic wills and also trusts. What would you say is the primary benefit from having a trust versus a will?
Well, that's a great question. So let me start off by saying it's been a focus of mine. I've been doing Islamic wills and trusts pretty much from the get-go, way back in 2008, 2009. And I kind of had that, I did it for family and friends originally. And then when my work allowed it, eventually I was able to actually have that as a side practice, side business ongoing. And I've really kind of worked on it. And I before I delve further, and I know like my templates are working because they've kind of come around. I've seen other people use my templates, whether they know or don't know that those are the templates that I created. But that's all great. Because ultimately the reason why I do it is because I want to encourage and help Muslims to be successful in that endeavor. So in terms of Islamic will, let me talk a little bit about what the wills entail. So the wills, we always tend to think of it as it's a method of distribution of your assets, but it's a little bit beyond that, especially if you have a Muslim background or if you're Muslim. It also helps you ensure that your burial is proper. It also helps ensure that the executor who you're not going to nominate in the will is seeking the right information and from the right people who you believe are have interpreted the faith correctly. It's also making sure that if you have minor children, that your minor children are taken care of if both their parents happen to be out of the picture due to the inevitable. So the will in of itself is a very important tool. And even if you build a trust, you still need the will. The benefit of the Islamic trust is it allows for you to avoid probate in distributing your assets. And I've seen it on both hands. I don't just create wills and trusts, but I actually handle the probate on the far end of it when the client passes away. And over the last 2 years, I've seen some very close people pass away, some close and religious people who are very mindful about making sure that the distribution is done Islamically. And I can tell you, when they don't have a trust in place, but they do have a will, that process can entail 7, 8, 9 months or a year before the distribution actually properly takes place. Because the probate process is long, it's expensive, it is cumbersome. And I have also seen, an individual who was very close to me, who passed away and was very organized, had a will, had trusts, and worked the trust properly. And frankly, a month after his passing, we've sorted out most of everything, and the distributions have already started, happening. So there's a real benefit, number one, to having the will, and number two, to having a trust with it, to make sure, A, that you maintain your privacy, B, that you avoid a probate, and C, when you avoid probate, that your family is actually benefiting from what you've left behind quicker rather than slower. We're talking about, it could be a difference of up to a year, realistically speaking, if you have a trust or if you don't have a trust. Now, with that said, I'll give you an example. In Illinois, if your assets are less than $100,000, then I would recommend not doing a trust. Just do a will and be done with it, but have the will, because you can do in a small estate affidavit and the distribution can take place quicker. But if your assets are over $100,000, you should definitely look into doing an Islamic will with a trust.
Well, and let me, push back on you a little bit in terms of the idea of, you say that somebody who doesn't have assets of $100,000, might be able to get away without a trust. But it seems to me that if a person doesn't have like a lot of money, having money immediately upon death is probably more important for that family than somebody who, has millions of dollars, and likely not only the deceased has that money, but likely that their family members have that money. And so therefore their family members probably have access to money that can be used even in the burial process. It would seem to me that, as a bank won't release funds to a relative who's trying to even bury their own family member unless they are appointed as the personal representative. So
right.
Would you not say that, again, just in terms of expediency, having a trust
Absolutely.
that allows the funds to immediately become available to the family members upon death is, almost in all instances, superior to
Absolutely.
a will that still has to go through the court process that could take months, if not years, as in the case in some of the, famous people that we know who have died with wills and still being litigated.
Right. You're absolutely right. You raise a good concern. However, it's coming back to realistically and meeting the expectations that the client has. A lot of times when clients have assets that are less than 100,000, they may be fearful of actually obtaining a trust because of the costs associated with it. Trusts are going to be part of an estate plan that's going to cost you a lot more than if you just had a will. So at the very least is what I encourage, have a will. Now, if your assets are under $100,000 and you feel that you should be able to spend that extra money to get a trust, absolutely, you're 100% right. It allows access to the funds immediately. And the one thing about Islamic law, and I do have a degree in Islamic studies as well, an equivalent of a bachelor's degree, and I'm working on my master's. But in Islamic law, obviously, our intent is when a person passes away to have them buried within 24 hours if possible. And if that's the case, you're absolutely right. The will is not going to do anything for you because you have to file a will, right? And then you have to get the small estate affidavit. You need a death certificate before you can do all of that. And the death certificate is not going to get issued in 24 hours. It takes a little bit of time. And the trust, yes, if it's administered properly, will release the funds immediately to the trustee. However, it becomes a cost issue for a lot of clients. They feel as though they don't have enough assets or that their loved ones will take care of them. And if that's the case, and again, I always talk to the clients and say, look, it's your individual decision. I recommend a trust every single time, but I understand if you don't want to do it because of the cost-benefit analysis. Now, alhamdulillah, for a lot of us in the Muslim community, and I can tell you, for example, in Peoria, Chicago area, and so on, if you need burial costs, someone will front the money for you. So there are ways of working through it. So long story short, what I'm saying is affordability is a concern for the client. And if the client feels that they cannot afford a trust with all their benefits, at the very least, make a will. And there's no excuse for not having a will. And as Muslims, we believe that the Prophet ﷺ, for example, told us that, we should not sleep without making sure that we have a will written for us. And there's good reason for it, especially in this country. where people don't realize that if you don't have a will, the state has provided a will for you, and every state has their own different methodology of distribution. I use Illinois as an example for a lot of people, but I can use Texas as well. I'm licensed in Illinois and Texas, but as Illinois as an example, for example, requires if you're married and you have children, that only your spouse and your children can inherit from you. So, for example, I have 2 sons. If I don't have a will, only my wife and my 2 sons will inherit. But Islamically, because my mom's still alive, I have an obligation to make sure that she gets a share. Even if she decides to refuse it, that's on her. But my last duty as a Muslim is my distribution of my assets. It's the very last action that I'm going to take place, that I'm going to be able to do. And I got to make sure that I do that the right way. And again, that's the religious perspective on it. And the will makes sure, because the laws in this country allow you to distribute your assets however you want, so long as you have a will, right? Not just because you said it to someone. It's got to be in writing. It's got to make sure you get your 2 witnesses. You want to get it notarized if you can, and all of that good stuff, right? If you can have the will, you can make sure the distribution at least takes place properly, Islamically, so that everyone gets their share. And if you're religious enough, then hopefully you'll believe that you can, inshallah, one day, you'll be able to tell Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I did my part. And that's ultimately what it is. I think Islamic will is not just proper legal planning, but it's also an act of worship. And it's, the way I look at it, is the last actual action by an individual that they actually do after they pass away.
I think that was really profound that you shared that. And I know you mentioned that you are a former prosecutor. Can you share a little bit about your work as a prosecutor? And we just had a question come up here, and a person who is stating that they believe that their attorney, dropped the ball on a case. And so they're currently representing themselves, and of course we don't know the actual facts of this case. But what might you advise people who have been charged with criminal infractions on how to best work with their attorneys to avoid these types of issues being a problem, and having to even think that their attorneys haven't done something? What can they do to be proactive?
So that's a great question. What I would suggest in a situation like this, now attorneys are human beings. They do make mistakes, and sometimes you have attorneys. And let me back up a little bit. So if you're somebody that's charged with a crime, most of the time you may not know who the good attorneys or not so good attorneys in town are. You're normally looking for an attorney if you don't get a public defender, or even if you get a public defender, you don't have a choice a lot of times on who it is that's going to represent you. If you don't get a public defender, you're looking for a private attorney, and you're just looking for recommendations. And usually those recommendations are coming from non-lawyers as well. So just like any other professions, there are good attorneys and there are bad attorneys. And there are good attorneys that make mistakes, and there's bad attorneys that do a great job at times, right? So yes, there are times when an attorney is going to represent you and it'll be ineffective assistance of counsel. When it comes to criminal cases, I want you, whoever this individual is that has a question, I want you to rest assured that the number one reason why cases are overturned, criminal cases are overturned, is actually ineffective assistance of counsel. Now, I want you to look at it 2 ways. One, is it because you think it's ineffective assistance of counsel? Well, you may not know what the attorney's strategy is, and it may appear to you like it's ineffective assistance, but the attorney might just be following the rules and doing things the right way, and you just don't realize it. And sometimes you lose cases even though you should win, and sometimes you win cases that you should have lost. That's the nature of human beings judging cases, which is what it is. However, if your counsel genuinely was ineffective in their assistance to you, and if you cannot afford it, usually the appellate defender's office, the public defender's office will take up that case, and that would be the number one argument that they use, because, like I said, that is the main reason why cases are overturned. So do talk to an appellate attorney about that if the case has already taken place. If the case is ongoing, you might want to raise that issue with the judge, or rather than actually raising the issue with the judge, go find another attorney. Fire your counsel, get somebody else. Because ultimately, you have to be satisfied with your attorneys presenting, but you also have to have some, introspection to realize, do you know better than the attorney? And if in that situation you know it's clear, then get another lawyer.
It's interesting that you mentioned the idea of being proactive, and then what your remedies are on the back end. I know that you also, speaking of being proactive, are also in your volunteer capacity, or maybe not. You can explain it to us. Serve as a vice president for a healthcare facility. I guess they're in Peoria. Can you tell us a little bit about that work, and how does that utilize your skills as an attorney?
So I am the vice president of Cordoba Healthcare. They are a free clinic that provides specialty care for patients in Peoria. So they're not there for general healthcare. Like if you have a cough and cold, that's not why they're there. But if you have heart issues, lung issues, major medical issues that you need a specialist for, every Sunday between noon and 3 p.m., they're open and completely free for anybody that walks in. And ideally, it's there to represent people, or it's there to help people or treat people that are uninsured or underinsured. But only you can be the judge of whether or not you're underinsured, because if you can't afford the care, you're underinsured. My role with that position is mostly as a board member, and I was I started off with helping set up the clinic, which meant making sure that they're properly registered, properly organized, and then making sure that their lease agreement with the relevant clinics and the liabilities and so on are adequately addressed. And really, that's my role. Now, I know I've done a little bit of healthcare, but I'll be honest, that's not my cup of tea. I don't focus on that, but I do focus a little bit on nonprofits and making sure that they're structured properly and that we deal with their problems. So I approach it more from a nonprofit perspective. And Illinois has a pretty Good Samaritan law that covers liabilities for nonprofit healthcare clinics. And if that's something that you wish to help out with in your state, if you're an attorney, do so. And if you're a doctor, do so, because you have an additional layer of protection for yourself. And you're able to help the community with the health issues, which, of course, is, I think, one of the most noble ways of helping people in need.
Now, is this a organization run by other Muslims like yourself, or is it just a community-based organization?
So it's community-based. I can tell you the board is Muslim, but the doctors and medical students and nurses and volunteers are of every background. You name it, right? We have a rather large medical school in Peoria. We have a large medical community here. We've got multiple hospitals that serve essentially the central portion of the state of Illinois. So we have doctors of every background. I mean, you name it. Hispanic, African Americans, whites. I mean, I think we have one gentleman from Brazil who was a medical student, so you name it. I mean, every background. So the service is provided by everybody. The board is Muslim.
And that's amazing. And I think that, we need more of those types of projects, especially as healthcare becomes so much more expensive. And as someone who has a healthcare administration, healthcare law background, I know how vital these types of clinics are in the healthcare system itself.
Absolutely.
Tell us, if you could, like what wakes you up at night, or what wakes you up, not at night, but what wakes you up every morning, like, about your practice. What's so unique and what's so special about it? What are the kind of goals that you are striving for, if you will, in the practice that you've had and been operating for so many years?
Well, that's a great question. So in terms of what keeps me up at night, obviously every attorney loses sleep over deliverables, right? You have deadlines. So you work on your deadlines and you're like, I just got to hit that deadline. I can't believe I'm sleeping. The client wants that lease marked up by tomorrow. And the other client has this filing that needs to be done yesterday, and you've missed the deadline. What's going on with that case and so on. So obviously you have the daily run-of-the-mill issues that you got to address. What keeps me up at night in terms of planning for my business, it's essentially trying to figure out specifically what the focus of my business is going to be. When I started off, I obviously had to do more of a general practice, but I've kind of slowly narrowed it down for what my focus is. Most of my representation now is actually business clients and local governments. But the one place that I've identified that I want to really grow in is providing, like I said, the Islamic estate planning. The wills and trusts, I think there's a definitive need in the community. So if you're an attorney, whatever state you're in, I can guarantee you that there's a need in your community for it. Do it. And you're doing a service. You're doing a service for the community. You're doing a service for people. Because as Muslims, if you talk to the people in the community, they all want it and they don't have it. So go out and do it and find the right price range. Keep the prices relatively low so that it's affordable. It's a little bit of making income and at the same time doing some community service, if you're a believer in that sense. So that's kind of the focus, the big focus that I want to move on. That's, trying to figure out how to do that. I'm planning on writing a book, hopefully, on Islamic wills and trusts and the need for it and how to do so. Hopefully that will help out other attorneys and individuals as well. So my focus right now is really, really hitting the ground running and changing the landscape of American Muslims and making estate planning and Islamic wills truly accessible to them and something that becomes second nature so that every single person out there takes benefit from it.
As a former prosecutor, I'm sure you are keenly aware of the growing violence that seems to be gripping communities across this country. Illinois, Maryland, DC,
Yep.
California, Texas, everywhere everywhere you find communities facing these problems. What do you think about proposals to end this spate of violence by focusing training, job and career training, especially cyber career training, mentoring, and then job placement for people who have fallen through the cracks and who are actually incarcerated, giving those that have made the mistakes, giving them the opportunities and focusing and dedicating the resources towards that population as a way of not only impacting them, but steering them away from going back into the kind of environments that got them into trouble in the first place, but also impacting the people who they influence, which could be, each person, could perhaps influence, tens, if not hundreds of people whose lives might be changed as a result of, one person successfully completing the program, changing their lives, almost kind of a Malcolm X type of, analogy, but on a different level. I mean, what do you think about that type of program?
Right. I think that would be an excellent program. In my experience, and I see it as a former prosecutor and also as somebody that does criminal defense work every now and then, you see a lot of people get involved with crime, and really what they need is that opportunity. And I can tell you, for example, in Illinois, they took an initiative a few years ago of enabling former convicts to seal their convictions and preventing employers from necessarily asking about, convictions in general. Because, for example, if somebody has a conviction in some minor issue, right, that's not related to the type of work you do, really, there's no reason for an employer to know every single thing about your history. So those are the type of initiatives. We have to be able to give people that have a conviction on their record a second chance at life. If you don't give that second chance at life, then they're going to do what they did, because at the end of the day, people have to, you have to pay your bills. You have to put food on the table. You have to, transport yourself from one place to another. You have to feed your kids. So all of those things require an individual to make a living. What we need to do is we need to empower people, especially folks that are redeemable, and most people are, to provide them, the opportunity to get their criminal history cleaned up one way or the other, whether it's expungements or sealments or whatever it may be. Number two, provide them the education and the skills that they need to go and make an honest living, and encourage them and hopefully place them in positions where they can get an honest living. And hopefully over time, they can understand that if you make an honest living and stay out of trouble, you can actually live the good life and move past, taking shortcuts with the law in feeding yourself and your family and so on. I think it's a step in the right direction. I don't think, I'm a bit of a, I don't think it's a one size fits all type of solution that if you just do this and all of a sudden everything's going to be fixed. But giving people the opportunity to find employment and good employment, which education helps with, I think is definitely a step in the right direction and will definitely help people. And we do that as probation terms a lot, where, you encourage people to get a job, because if they get a job, they'll be able to do other things. And the best way to get a job is to get educated. And I'm an attorney. I believe you're an attorney. I mean, we're making a living because we went to school for a long, long, long time. And, a little bit of education. And just to add a little bit to it, I don't want to digress too much, but there appears to be recently in the last 4 to 6 years of political climate in this country that almost discourages higher education. Education is great. Education is good for you. It's not just, not only does it help you earn more than what you normally would have, but even if it doesn't, it makes you a well-rounded person, and it truly helps you understand society around you and what your responsibilities are, and to kind of navigate society itself. So education is key. I grew up in a family where we were told that anything less than a graduate degree is not worthwhile. So I can tell you myself, my siblings, my parents, they all have graduate degrees. So education cannot be underestimated in any way. Excellent
points. Can you share a little bit with us, Syed, about what you as a business owner see as your goals for this year and for the short and long term? What are you striving for?
Right.
Every day that you get up,
Right.
what are some of the goals that you are striving for? And then maybe as a secondary question, what are the tools or what are the milestones that you need to hit in order to reach those goals?
Right. And that's an excellent question, because as a business owner, you're constantly thinking about those things. The primary issue that keeps me awake at night is, let me back up a little bit, if I may. So I saw a documentary maybe about 10 years ago, and I remember it was after the previous recession in 2008, when there was a collapse of the banks and so on. And that's what the documentary was about, which is kind of not what I do. But in the documentary, the CEO of one of the banks, he said something that really clicked with me. And he said, if you don't grow, you're going to die, right? Essentially, if you don't grow, you're done. So what keeps me awake at night is trying to figure out ways to grow my business. And I don't necessarily mean trying to get more clients in the door. That obviously is the obvious part. We all want more clients to come in the door. But where we run short is we get clients in the door, but as attorneys, we sell our time. My time, I only get 24 hours a day, just like you do, and just like everybody else does. So when I talk about growth, I'm talking about making sure I'm able to is trying to figure out a way where I can get attorneys and other staff to actually come in and be able to retain them. And I can speak for my part of the country where there's a great shortage of attorneys. So the one thing that keeps me up at night is trying to find a way to hire an attorney that would actually want to put in the work, go to court, and learn all the tricks of the trade. and help people. So the biggest issue that I have is actually right now trying to find the right employees to come on board so that we can kind of grow together. So that's what kind of keeps me up at night.
And so for young lawyers who might, hear this podcast and be interested, what's the best way of them, getting in contact with you?
You shoot me an email. My email address is syed@salkfirm.com. That's salcfirm.com. Syed obviously is written on the screen, SYED. So SYED at salcfirm.com. And I don't want to talk too much about the employment opportunity, but if you're an attorney that's licensed in Illinois or Texas or anywhere else, let's have a chat and let's see what we can do to get you going. Now, if you're in Illinois, even better, but you don't have to be. So we can definitely have a chat.
And I've put the email there in the chat, and I'll share it on the screen there.
Thank you
for folks who want to follow up and perhaps learn a little bit more about the opportunities with your practice, or even perhaps I would imagine, are you open to mentoring young lawyers? Is that something?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. For that matter.
Absolutely. One of the things I do is in the community, I have a few young kids that like to, when I say young kids, I mean high school kids, that like to job shadow me all the time. And usually if they're 12, 13 or above, they're welcome to join me. And when I'm in court, I make it a point to let them know so that they can hop along and see how things take place. So mentoring, job shadowing, any of that, whether you're a lawyer or an aspiring lawyer, absolutely reach out.
And so let me ask you a final question. As you mentioned, young people, if you had to, roll the clock back and give yourself some advice, to, let's say, a 17-year-old or a 21 or 25-year-old Syed Ahmad, what would that advice be? What would you give yourself as advice that could help you to either avoid mistakes that you may have made, or do something more that you did do but you wish you would have done even a little bit better?
Right. That's a very deep question. I'll tell you, if you had asked me this question 10 or 15 years ago, and this is probably true for a lot of attorneys my age group. I started practicing in 2008. If you started practicing in 2008, 2009, you probably would have advised your 17-year-old self to find some other career. I can tell you that today, I would go back and tell myself, keep going. You're doing the right thing. And it's a great time to be an attorney. Kind of going with the intent. What I would tell my 17-year-old self is, trust the process. Keep working hard. Things will work out. And just work hard. Just work hard, and there'll be fruit for your labor. And the key thing is always don't do it just for yourself. Always do it with an underlying benefit to the others, because truly, as attorneys, our job is to help others. We help people navigate through the various problems that they face in their life. And it becomes a legal issue because it's a life problem. And it's not a health problem. It's not a food problem. It's a life problem. We solve problems for people. That's what we do for a living. So if you want to be an attorney, you must be somebody who likes to solve problems for people and their life problems, whether you can look at it in a criminal term, you can look at it in the family law issues, you can look at it as estate planning, you can look at it as business law issues, whatever issues it is. Learn to help people. And if you enjoy helping people, you're going to enjoy this profession. And so going back to where I was, I can tell you at this point, if you would have asked me 10, 15 years ago, I might have said, don't start this profession. But today I can tell you I have no regrets. I'm thankful, first and foremost, to the Lord, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then, of course, the way that everything has played out. I think it's just keep persevering, stay true to yourself, and help the people that you feel need the help the most.
Well, it's amazing that you mentioned that last point, and that is having faith, because oftentimes question, like, am
Mhm.
I in the right space at this time? Should I be pivoting? And I think as young people, they're always going to be challenged, and they're always going to run into barriers. And I think as you said before, what you found as being helpful is leaning on that faith and being perseverant, and knowing um, perhaps that what you are doing is not just self-serving, but is hopefully serving a higher purpose, prayerfully the purpose of pleasing our Creator,
Absolutely.
as you said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as a Muslim. um, and as you wrap up, and I know we're approaching Ramadan, what are some of the unique challenges for yourself as a Muslim lawyer? Particularly, uh, as you go into Ramadan. I mean, do you feel challenges to you know, practice your faith the way that we've been taught in terms of making prayers, and not at certain times not engaging in certain business practices? Is this a challenge for you as a lawyer? And if so, how do you navigate that?
So I'm going to pivot into that question with the last question. Um, One of the things that I did is I made a conscious decision when I left the big law practice, or big law, or medium-sized law, I should call it. And part of the reason why I did it is because I wanted to, it's going to the trusting yourself. So if you're doing things for the right reasons, then trust yourself and just do it. And that's part of the reason why I was uncomfortable with a lot of the cases that I was doing for the larger law firm, because they deal with a lot of interest related issues. They deal with a lot of issues that at the end of the day you might feel like you've won, but you feel a little icky about it as Muslims. So part of my reasoning for actually spinning off, and this is where I'm going to transition into the question that you currently posed, of transitioning into my own firm, is because I wanted to be able to come home and say I did the right thing. I don't have undue pressures to do things that I feel uncomfortable about as a Muslim. And having my own practice, one of the greatest benefits of it is that I'm the boss. And what that means is if I need to be off for Eid, for example, I'm going to be off for Eid. It's my calendar is going to be blocked off, right? Ramadan's coming along. So, as a practicing attorney, again, who's generally in control of his schedule, not completely. Obviously, times when there's a court setting or when I have a meeting with the client, it is what it is. I try to temper my schedule for Ramadan, right? So normally I might start my workday between 8 and 9 sometime. On Ramadan, it might be 10 o'clock. It is what it is. But then what happens is, because you're staying up late at night, maybe I might push in an hour or two in the evening if I need to. Or I might just say, you know what? No, Ramadan is for worship. So it's not unusual for me, actually, over the last couple of years, to actually narrow my workday down to like 6 hours during Ramadan. And again, if you're an attorney in a big law firm, you may not be able to do that, and you have to kind of struggle through it. But it's one of those things that have kind of come around at my age, having my own business, where I'm able to do that, where I'm able to calendar myself into a smaller workday. I'm able to focus on what's important for me. And again, we're talking about 4 weeks, right? A little over 4 weeks. That's all it is. Spread out your work over the weekends if you can. Do 2-3 hours over the weekend, a little more than what you would have done. But being able to temper my schedule is the biggest thing. I'm mindful of the religious duties that we have. Um, you know, part of being a Muslim lawyer is understanding that don't push away. But you know what that also means? I work on Christmas. I don't celebrate Christmas, so I'm at the office on Christmas. And some of my clients look at the bills and they're like, "You worked on Christmas Day?" I'm like, "Yeah, I did." So there are ways of making up those hours. Pace yourself. If you have your own firm, pace yourself. You have a whole year. Uh, Slowing down your practice for a few weeks, really 3 or 4 weeks is not that big of a deal. The way I look at it, I don't have, I don't take the lunch hour. So I'm through it. I'll tell you the most difficult thing, obviously, is the water aspect of it.
I think we were a
Really the
little
coffee. So one of the things I've done is
we're getting a little bit of I think a connection issue, but I think
I'm sorry.
no worries. I think that one of the things that you were saying is that you don't take warm showers. But I think we might have misheard that. But I think the point that you were making was that you were able to balance it and create a work
Right.
life balance that fits your specific walk as a Muslim,
Absolutely.
as well as an
Absolutely.
attorney. Is that in summary what you're saying?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you one other thing. If you let the judges and the other attorneys and your clients know, especially the ones that you work with a lot, they will accommodate you. They will. So I try to make sure I don't have a trial over the next month during Ramadan. And I let the judges know why. I mean, I don't want to try a case when I haven't had coffee.
Well,
or if I can't drink water.
I definitely appreciate that, and I think that especially for new lawyers who are beginning their practices, they will probably be particularly grateful that they have heard those really pearls, if you will, that you've shared with us. And I just want to express our gratitude for you coming aboard tonight, sharing with us some of your wisdoms. And just to emphasize to people, if you are looking for an attorney and you need the caliber of skill that you have heard today, then Abe Legal, again going to abe.legal, is a resource for you. Someone who finds himself oftentimes just wanting to talk to a lawyer and not knowing where they can find a lawyer that they can trust. Abe Legal was created just to answer that particular need. And as you can see, we are lawyers who are particularly concerned about the needs of people of color and Muslims, African Americans, South Asians, and the like. You have a home, if you will, a legal home, and we would welcome you to reach out to us. We're available, day or night. But of course, we try to be mindful about having a work-life balance as well. But we do our best to work in a way that satisfies your needs. So we're really grateful. Again, Attorney Ahmad, that you've joined us. And, any last comments before you leave?
No, again, thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate it. I know you guys are doing great work in providing resources to the community so that they can get proper legal representation. And, I'm one of those people. I'm signed up. So thank you for the opportunity. And I would love to continue working with you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I wish you and your family assalamu alaikum and peace as you begin this beautiful month of Ramadan. There is a dua, as you know, which says, Allahumma barakhna Shaban wa balagna Ramadan. Allah bless us to enjoy this month before Ramadan.
Absolutely.
And allow us to see the month of Ramadan. So we
absolutely.
wish that upon you and your family. And again, we're looking forward to working with you.
All right. Same to you. Thank you so much.
Well, as we conclude, I want to bring to the attention of our colleagues, one of our departed colleagues, who was a wonderful lawyer, Attorney Tito Castro, who really was a man, a lawyer, a father that did a lot in his career. And we want to lift him up, if you will, and well, at least lift his name up as he's no longer with us, to just express our appreciation to the Almighty for allowing us to work with him, and to ask that the Almighty give particularly his family some particular guidance and help during these difficult times. As we as was said earlier, none of us are prepared to leave as much as we would like to be prepared. And again, having a will or a trust absolutely is something that we should all do, even as lawyers. And so we very much, again, are mindful of Attorney Castro, and we again just would like to send out a word of prayer to the Almighty to bless his family, to comfort them, and to prepare us all, because each and every one of us will reach a day where we are no longer here, and we will be attending our funerals, as they say, as guests of honor. And so we pray that when that day arrives, that we will be ready, and so we again would be remiss if we did not part on that note. So again, here's to the good works of Attorney Tito Castro, and we pray that his family and all those who were impacted by his life are experiencing some peace and comfort at this time. So again, this has been a wonderful conversation. This is Abe Legal. If you have any again legal needs, don't hesitate to let us know. Again, as we said before, we're here and we're working for you day and night, and we'll put that website on the screen so you can know how to reach us, and we look forward to being available to you. This is Attorney Talib Kareem with Abe Legal. This has been the Abe Legal Podcast featuring Attorney Syed Ahmad, and providing a memorial tribute to our departed colleague, Attorney Tito Castro. Have a wonderful day or evening.